FCC Chairman discusses Paramount-Skydance merger, a course correction for media oversight. In a bold statement affecting the landscape of media regulation, the chairman of the FCC has emphasized the importance of overseeing networks, asserting that it provides a crucial course correction in the current media environment. This reveals a significant moment in the ongoing debate surrounding media trust and regulation. Let's delve deeper into the FCC's recent decision allowing the parent company of CBS, Paramount, to join forces with the Hollywood studio Skydance. This merger has been closely monitored and was approved by a narrow 2-to-1 vote. The approval came after Paramount settled for $16 million with former President Trump regarding a controversial 60 Minutes interview featuring former Vice President Kamala Harris. Additionally, Skydance has agreed to make certain concessions, such as appointing an independent monitor to oversee claims of bias at CBS. Earlier this week, we had the opportunity to speak with FCC Commissioner Ana Gomez, who voiced her dissent against the merger and raised significant concerns regarding its potential impact on First Amendment rights and the freedom of the press. In contrast, we now turn to FCC Chairman Brendan Carr, who supports the merger and believes it will foster improved, fact-based reporting that ultimately serves public interests. Jeff Bennett, welcome to the NewsHour, Mr. Chairman. You've mentioned that this merger is set to help restore fair and fact-driven reporting. In what ways does this deal fulfill that goal, and what criteria did the FCC employ to evaluate it? Brendan Carr, I'm thrilled to discuss this, and I believe the work the FCC has done here is commendable. Our team dedicated a lot of effort to this matter, and we see it as a significant win for American citizens. We are currently experiencing a notable decline in trust towards media sources, a trend that started decades ago. Paramount's agreement to introduce more fact-based and unbiased coverage in their newsrooms as part of this merger is a step in the right direction. They specifically pledged to depict a diversity of opinions from varying political and ideological perspectives. This is particularly critical because, far too often, we observe news coverage that leans towards specific political narratives rather than presenting a balanced view. A commitment to showcasing diverse viewpoints is essential for the public, and I genuinely believe this merger is a positive development for our society. Jeff Bennett. Considering this sentiment about bias in traditional media, should the government be involved in correcting what many perceive as bias? Isn't it the responsibility of the audience or the free market to manage this issue, rather than the FCC or federal government? Brendan Carr, that's an important distinction to make. The FCC has various roles depending on the types of media outlets. For digital platforms like podcasts or streaming services, we don't regulate them. They operate fully within market forces. In contrast, legacy broadcasters such as CBS or PBS must adhere to FCC regulations because they are licensed to use limited public airwaves, a resource for which they must show accountability. When we grant a broadcasting license, we're effectively denying that capacity to another entity. Thus, broadcasters are held to a unique public interest obligation. Historically, the FCC has not consistently enforced this mandate, and the American public has not benefited from that inaction. Surveys indicate that trust in mainstream news has declined to unprecedented lows, even below the trust levels attributed to Congress itself. Therefore, I believe it is essential for Congress to instruct the FCC to enforce public interest standards among these broadcasters, which is what we are striving to do. Jeff Bennett. Regarding the bias monitor at CBS, if they produce critical reporting about President Trump, could that be subject to scrutiny under this new system? Who will ultimately decide what constitutes bias? Brendan Carr. Initially, the responsibility will lie with CBS itself. The bias monitor positions are being filled by CBS, and those individuals will report directly to the president of CBS. This model resembles practices seen in newspapers, where public editors have existed for years. It's not an entirely new concept, as evidenced by past agreements during different administrations, such as when Comcast also had an ombudsman to ensure journalistic independence during their merger. Thus, while the role of a bias monitor is established, it's ultimately the broadcaster's responsibility to manage these issues. If complaints arise concerning news distortion, where the FCC has established rules regarding broadcasting, specifically, not cable, then we'll address any complaints as they come forward. Ideally, we hope to see these course corrections occur organically within the company. Jeff Bennett, you mentioned that in the previous NBC-GE case, the Ombudsman helped shield NBC's newsroom from ownership influence. In this current situation, however, Skydance implies a government-sanctioned supervision of news content, raising concerns about press freedom, doesn't it? Brendan Carr, not in my opinion. To highlight, in both cases, the NBC instance and this current scenario, the government is approving the idea of the company employing an ombudsman designed to ensure a balanced newsroom. This doesn't mean the FCC directly regulates newsroom content. Rather, it's a company initiative to improve their reporting capabilities. Given that broadcasters are obligated to serve the public interest, having this position can be beneficial. We must implement changes in response to the existing trend of diminished trust in news outlets. Moreover, CBS has committed to empowering local television stations. Many may not realize this, but the media landscape operates on two levels: national broadcasters like CBS and local stations that hold FCC licenses. Over recent years, national media organizations have increasingly centralized control over local stations, which in my view is not ideal. The commitment from CBS to bolster local stations is a welcomed change that can ultimately benefit consumers. Jeff Bennett, your argument suggests that these concessions were voluntarily offered by Skydance and Paramount. However, how voluntary can these concessions truly be when the condition was regulatory approval, and when many of these concessions align closely with the interests of President Trump, such as dismantling DEI policies? Brendan Carr, this practice is typical within the FCC's operations. For instance, in a previous transaction, a company also made commitments pertaining to DEI initiatives during the last administration, which the FCC accepted. In this instance, we are observing a similar process but addressing aspects of DEI that can cross into discriminatory practices. The FCC has long-standing rules to combat such forms of discrimination in broadcasting. The commitments from CBS to eliminate any discriminatory practices are beneficial and align with our authority to maintain non-discrimination among regulated entities. Jeff Bennett, recently, President Trump hinted on social media that you should contemplate revoking the licenses of networks like ABC and NBC due to their perceived partisan influence. Is that something on your agenda? Brendan Carr, to be clear, I believe that a course correction is necessary across the board. If we examine the broader context, President Trump's campaign spotlighted various entrenched national news outlets that have been met with skepticism by many Americans. His focus has arguably allowed for enhanced options for people seeking diverse news and information. The media landscape is now more competitive than ever, with the rise of podcasts and online streaming, which is a positive development. While there was a time when people relied on just 3 broadcasters for news, now a multitude of options are available. Ultimately, this diversification is advantageous. At the same time, if broadcasters fail to meet their public interest duties, the FCC retains the authority to consider potential license revocation as a penalty. Jeff Bennett, when President Trump issued similar threats in the past, then FCC Chairman Ajit Pai stated that he valued the First Amendment and asserted that the FCC does not possess the authority to revoke a station's license based on specific broadcast content. What has changed since then? Brendan Carr. That was Chairman Pai's perspective, not mine, and it was a very focused statement regarding specific broadcast content. However, if broadcasters engage in ongoing practices that contravene their public interest obligations, Congress has explicitly assigned the FCC to take action in those scenarios. The lack of enforcement of the public interest mandate by the FCC has not benefited the American public. Thus, we aim to take proactive measures in this arena. Congress mandates this, and should the public disagree, they have the option to lobby Congress to alter the regulations. But our current mandate is clear, and it is our duty to enforce public interest standards. Jeff Bennett. Thank you for your insights, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr. We appreciate your time this evening. Brendan Carr. It's been a pleasure to join you. Thank you. How Larry Ellison's son pulled off $8 billion Paramount deal, Hollywood's biggest merger. Imagine the power of two titans in Hollywood, Larry Ellison and his son David Ellison, pulling off a deal that will shake the entertainment industry to its core. The Federal Communications Commission, FCC, has given the green light to an $8 billion merger between Paramount and Skydance Media, a deal that was first announced 383 days ago. This monumental merger, set to close on August 7th, will transform Larry Ellison, 80, and his son David Ellison, 42, into one of the most influential duos in Hollywood, with control over TV shows, movies, news, and more. But here's where it gets controversial. The merger was only approved after some significant concessions from both parties. Paramount agreed to pay President Trump $16 million to resolve a lawsuit over 60 minutes edit of a 2024 interview with Kamala Harris. This payment is earmarked for Trump's future presidential library. Meanwhile, Skydance had to commit to ensuring that its programming embodies a diversity of viewpoints and adopts measures to root out bias in the national news media, as per the FCC's decision. And this is the part most people miss. The merger involves some late changes in control. Initially, Larry Ellison, the second richest person on Earth, held all the voting and equity shares in the Pinnacle Media Ventures holding companies acquiring the Paramount stake. These shares were held through his Lawrence J. Ellison Revocable Trust, the same entity that owns his Oracle shares and most of his estimated $1.5 billion in real estate. In October 2024, an amendment filed with the FCC changed the voting rights so that David Ellison held 100% of the Pinnacle entity's voting interest, but Larry kept the equity. There was yet another change in mid-July. This time, David's voting rights in post-merger Paramount were reduced to 50%. His father Larry ought 27.5%, according to FCC filings. This means no single shareholder can outvote David. But it also means that he needs his father to approve everything from budgets to key investments. Larry Ellison appears to control all of the Ellison family's approximately 26% equity stake tied to those voting shares in post-merger Paramount. Plus at least 10% more with no voting power. On top of that, the Ellisons also own another 6.7% equity stake through Skydance Entertainment Group. If Larry Ellison ever decided to team up with Jerry Cardinale's Redbird Capital, which invested in David's Skydance in 2020 and controls the remaining 22.5% of the vote, the two parties could block David Ellison. David Ellison could also sway Redbird if his father disagreed. The main reason for the change, at least according to two sources, has more to do with money than power. From a voting standpoint, David Ellison will be in control through his entities, but the taxable benefits will flow to Larry, says Los Angeles-based mergers and acquisitions lawyer Alex Davis, who is not involved in the transaction. Davis says the changes were probably due to regulatory reasons and are not unusual. His profitable businesses could benefit from any kind of taxable losses or depreciation with this business. A spokesperson for Skydance declined to comment. Redbird, David Ellison, and the FCC did not respond to a request for comment before publication. It's possible that President Trump's taking office in January also had something to do with it too. While David Ellison met with both Trump and FCC Chair Brendan Carr ahead of the deal's approval, he also donated around $1 million to Joe Biden's re-election campaign in February 2024. Meanwhile, Larry Ellison and Trump have a long-standing relationship. In January, Ellison showed up at the White House to help Trump announce his $500 billion Stargate AI infrastructure initiative. And Trump told reporters that same month that he'd be open to an Ellison-led deal to buy TikTok, for which Trump has extended its sell-by date to September. Plus, Ellison has promised an overhaul of Paramount-owned CBS, potentially seeded by Skydance's vow to end diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. I think he's going to run CBS really well, and I think he's making a good deal to buy it. I think he's great, Trump said of Larry Ellison at a July 3 rally. Oracle is reportedly in talks to have Paramount and Skydance run on the same Oracle-provided cloud technology, worth $100 million per year. That's a pittance for Ellison, who's worth more than $290 billion, and earns more than $1 billion before taxes each year in Oracle dividends alone. As for how David shares in that wealth, it's somewhat of a black box, intentionally. Larry Ellison put 90,000 shares into a trust for his two children, David and Meghan, at Oracle's IPO in 1994. If the trust had held onto those shares, they'd be worth more than $4 billion today. But there is little paper trail since. After the 1994 prospectus, the Children's Trust was mentioned intermittently, then for the last time in a 2012 filing. By then, David and Meghan were listed as having 933,334 Oracle shares via their trust. That's a fraction of what they should have had by then on a split-adjusted basis, meaning that millions of shares were either distributed directly to them, swapped out of the trust for other assets, sold as part of diversification, or some combination of all three. What we do know is that David and Meghan also got shares in NetSuite, a pioneering cloud computing company in which their dad was an early investor. When Oracle bought NetSuite in 2016 for $9.3 billion, David pocketed some $370 million pre-tax that today could be worth as much as $550 million. Skydance, Paramount, and Larry Ellison have been intertwined from the start. In 2008, Larry Ellison incorporated Sayonara LLC for media production investments. Months after he started reporting pledges of his Oracle shares as collateral for lines of credit. Around the time David and Meghan Ellison were gearing up to start Skydance and production studio Annapurna Pictures in 2010 and 2011, respectively. Per FCC filings, Sayonara LLC is one of the entities that owns the Ellison's controlling Skydance stake. In 2009, David Ellison raised $350 million, some from his father, to finance a 5-year agreement with Paramount to co-produce movies. He notched his first big hit with the Coen brothers' Oscar-nominated 2010 film True Grit, the first feature film produced by Skydance, which grossed more than $250 million worldwide on a $38 million budget. As of mid-2024, Skydance had produced or co-financed 35 feature films, 24 of which were in partnership with Paramount, per regulatory filings. In 2023, Skydance lost $54 million on nearly $1 billion in revenue. Meanwhile, Meghan's Annapurna Pictures, known for critically acclaimed films including Her and Zero Dark 30, reportedly struggled with hundreds of millions in debt and flirted with filing for bankruptcy protection, eventually resolved with her father's help. Although it's not known whether Ellison uses his pledged Oracle shares to finance Annapurna, Skydance, or possibly the latter's merger with Paramount, it's likely according to Davis. As of September 2024, Ellison had pledged 277 million shares, or $47 billion worth, of Oracle stock, to secure personal term loans only used to fund outside personal business ventures, per a regulatory filing. Regardless, the fact that David Ellison has relied so heavily on his dad to help finance Skydance and now Paramount suggests that he may not yet have access to much, if any, of his Oracle shares. And while David, of course, will be running Paramount as CEO, behind closed doors, no one quite knows how Larry and David will coexist. So, what do you think? Will this merger lead to a new era of entertainment dominance, or will it spark a wave of controversy and debate? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. CBS News under threat. Skydance merger sparks DEI concerns Ombudsman oversight. Imagine walking into your favorite newsroom only to find a new hall monitor watching over every story. That's the reality CBS insiders fear as Paramount's $8 billion merger with Skydance takes shape, casting a shadow over the future of journalism. But here's where it gets controversial. Skydance plans to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI policies, and introduce an ombudsman to oversee CBS News. This move sparks debate about the true intentions behind the merger and its impact on journalistic integrity. The merger, approved on Thursday, marks a significant shift in the media landscape. But within CBS News, a Paramount subsidiary, concerns are growing. When the welcome gift of the new owner is a hall monitor, it isn't exactly a ringing endorsement of how the new ownership feels about the news division. A CBS insider shared with Fox News Digital, requesting anonymity to avoid repercussions. Skydance, committed to dismantling Paramount's DEI initiatives, plans to create an ombudsman role to investigate perceived bias within CBS News. This ombudsman will act as an independent inspector, reporting directly to Skydance CEO David Ellison. But what exactly does this mean for CBS's commitment to diversity and inclusion? And this is the part most people miss. How will the ombudsman's role impact CBS's long-standing DEI goals? CBS has embraced these initiatives, with The Late Show host Stephen Colbert famously refusing to accept writing samples from men to diversify his team. Will the new ombudsman's authority override such efforts? Some argue that Skydance's move to eliminate DEI initiatives is a step backward for journalism. Others see it as a necessary shift towards merit-based hiring. But what do you think? Is this a controversial decision that could redefine the future of news? Or is it a much-needed correction to the industry's focus on diversity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As the dust settles on this merger, one thing is clear. CBS News is entering uncharted territory. With the ombudsman's role yet to be defined, the future of journalism at CBS hangs in the balance. Will this be a new era of unbiased reporting, or a return to a more traditional, potentially biased approach? Stay tuned for updates.